Hey everybody, I am Stacy, the owner and artist of New Creations by Stacy. I'm an elite Dixie Belle retailer here at the Rustic Willow in Ardmore. And tonight, I'm just coming on. We're going to be really, I don't have any direction where I'm going tonight. So we're just going to be playing around with kind of a grungy finish. I never paint in yellow, so we're going to play around with some of the yellows on here. It's really in its super ugly state. Hey, Jennifer, super ugly state right now. But let's go ahead and I'll just tell you a little bit about what I did already. And we'll just see where we end up, because truthfully, I don't know either. So tonight, we're working on this little bookend table, and it's, hey Trish, and it's, so right now, first of all, of course, I cleaned it with white lightning. I always clean my pieces with white lightning. Hey, Mike. I always clean my pieces with white lightning. It's going to be a little bit of a deglosser, as well as, it's going to get all like the grease, the grime, anything that would prevent your paint from adhering well. Something that's on the surface that's not stuck really well. So of course, that's the first thing I do, is clean it with white lightning. And then after that, I did go ahead and do a scuff sand on this piece. And I did completely sand down the top. And we'll talk about kind of what I'm going to do with that as well. And then I used sea spray, because I want this to be a textured finish. I want it to be a little grungy. Hey, how's Debbie? Is she out of the hospital? I know I talked to her the other morning, but anyway. So I'm really, you guys forgive me tonight. If you ever get in one of like those little funks with painting or whatever, that's where I'm at today. So that's why I really have no plan. But I did go ahead and use some sea spray in my paint to add a little bit of texture. And I started off with coffee bean, which is a deep dark brown color. And then also with Gravel Road, which is kind of a grayish color with some brown undertones. And the reason that I did that, so my objective, you guys, I'm embarrassed to say I have like over 100 transfers in my personal collection, and I've got a ton of scraps. So really, I'm wanting to do some pieces to kind of get rid of those scraps. And I also want to paint in some colors that I don't normally paint in, or furniture in anyway. You'll see I've used the colors, but a lot of that, I use Dixie Belle to create artistic painting as well. So that's how I end up using a lot of these colors. And these yellows have been sitting around for a couple years. So I just want to do a piece of furniture with them, try to kind of get rid of some of my older products. So that's really what I'm doing right now. And plus, I love yellows. I just normally don't do furniture in them. And then I have some scraps. So I made Lazy Susans with this particular transfer. And I'm just going to show you. So I have some scraps here, and I'm thinking that I want to use this on this piece, probably either just on the top or in this section here. So that's why I've got this a little bit lighter. It's in drop cloth. Oh, good. I'm so glad. Good. I'm glad she's home. I've been praying for her. So I've done this in drop cloth. I don't really know if I'm going to keep it that way or not. And the reason I put texture on here is because I know I want to go with a grungy finish. This was a pretty beat up piece of furniture. So texture will hide a lot of that. And this is just one of the other sheets of this transfer. So you can kind of see some of the fuller images. And it's a lot of yellows. It has a very gray undertone in it. And this is vintage rustic, by the way. So I do have this one available to you at the Rustic Willow. But that's kind of where this is coming from. So we're just really going to go ahead and get started painting. And I have a bunch of different colors out here, but I'm thinking I'm going to start with Rebel Yellow. And you guys, these are open because you can see I had to revive it a little bit. They were really kind of thick and chunky, but that doesn't make your paint bad. You can just add a little bit of water and then stir it up really well. And that's what I was doing right before I went live. So we're going to start with Rebel Yellow, probably some Lemonade, which is the very light yellow. And then also some Pine Cone, which is a very underused color, but it's fantastic for aging. And just in case, I also have some chocolate out here, as well as, so this one is new though. I have used all my Colonel Mustard. I've got Colonel Mustard out just in case I decide to pull that out, as well as some buttercream. And buttercream is a very, it's kind of an off-white, but it has a slightly yellow undertone to it. So that's why I have that color out. So this is very textured. Like I said, it's in a very ugly stage. So I'm going to kind of go ahead and start on the side. And you see this white on here. I was just, I wanted to see kind of how the texture was working. So I just went ahead and kind of did a dry brush over this side with the drop cloth that I was using. So I'm going to go ahead and pull you guys in just a little bit. And by the way, just say hey where you're watching from. I know some people have already said hey already. If you guys have any questions, it doesn't have to pertain to this. Just ask about anything. Well, paint related, I guess, or transfer related. And I'll try to watch the comments, but if not, I'll come on after and answer any questions that I missed as well. So let me just go ahead. I'm hoping you guys can kind of see my plate because I suspect I'll be mixing kind of these colors together just to come up. I'm probably going to be, again, I have no direction. I'm just going to paint. I'm probably going to do a little bit of blending, maybe a little bit of wet distressing. I've got some baby wipes here. I also have sponges if I decide to go for maybe more Old World. Might do a little bit of drippy too. I don't really know yet. So this has only been on here too for about 4 hours. And the sea spray does take a little bit longer to dry, so I did have a fan going on it. I anticipate that this is going to reactivate a little bit. So it'll probably mix in with the colors that I'm using now as well. So I'm going to go ahead and start, and I'm going to mist this down because like I said, I'm probably going to be doing a little bit of blending, a little bit of dabbing. I've got a lot of different brushes out here as well, and I'm going to go ahead and start with my premium chip brushes. So if you want a very smooth finish, you normally want to use the synthetic brushes. They're super soft. They're very kind of flowing and long. These help to get a brush streak finish, but that's not really what I'm going for here. I have some out because I may end up using them, but for the most part, I'm going for texture. So that's why I'm using our premium chip brushes. And again, no real direction, but I do know probably around my edges, I'm going to want it to be a little bit more shaded. So that's kind of why I'm just kind of dabbing on here. My paint's pretty thick. So I'm just going in those lower areas so that I can get some highlights going. And this paint is not going to dry. So chalk paint typically dries within 15 minutes. This paint is not going to dry as quickly because it is, I've sprayed it down. So I'm mainly just kind of laying out how I want my shading. And then I'm going to come in, that was Pine Cone, and I'm going to come in with my Rebel Yellow. Maybe just do a little bit of dabbing in here, kind of maybe where I want some highlights, where I want it to be a little lighter. So I'm not too worried about my top. I can take like my rad pads. So if I get any paint up here where I've already sanded off, I'll take my rad pads and I can just quickly go over it and get that paint out. So right now I'm actually using this dabbing motion. Let me pull you guys in. So you can see I'm using this dabbing motion and I'm actually blending my paints a little bit. I want to keep that dark. I'm going to let some of that gray color that I had earlier bleed through a little bit. I'm actually going to use my synthetic brush and I'm going to dip a little. This is a round small. And I'm going to dip a little of the lemonade in here to kind of brighten this up some. And so now I've got a lot of really nice texture going on. I've got a lot of blending. I'm going to come back in with my pine cone, kind of bring it up. Just going to keep dabbing. And you know what? I think I want to take my small and I want to do some smoother blending. I don't necessarily want this texture everywhere. And maybe just get a little bit more. What I'm doing is I've got the lemonade and I'm dabbing my brush off a bit because I really just kind of want to highlight. I don't want to get this down into the cracks where I've got that dark, but I want to get that highlight going. And see, you can see layers are the key with this. You can see where I've got that gravel road peeking through. I kind of like that. So I'm going to kind of leave this alone. I've got a lot of texture going on over here. So let's see. I'm going to do a little bit more spray. And I'm going to come back in with a little bit of pine cone. And let's start at the bottom, kind of work this up. And again, I'm dabbing because I want that texture. I'm going for that aged look. So on the legs, you know, I originally intended to go Art Deco with this, but I just wasn't feeling it. So that's kind of why I ended up going this route here. So let's go ahead and put a little more Rebel Yellow in. I'm going to kind of go crossways. The reason I'm going crossways is I really want to leave some of that dark. See how it's creating so much dimension? I want to leave some of that dark in the grooves. So if I go up and down, my brush bristles are naturally going to go into those grooves. That's going to cover that up. So let's come down here, do a little bit of this. Actually, I'm going to come and dab. I want to blend this a little bit more. I'll spray a little water. It's getting kind of dry, so it's not blending together as well as I want it to. They're coming out very separate and layered, and I'm not really feeling that. I kind of like that more blended look. And I don't necessarily want to keep every single spot I don't want to necessarily have every part of the groove showing. Kind of want it to be a little variated as well. And so with this look too, once I get the paint on and everything, I will end up using Dixie dirt and aging this out a little bit more. Spray a little bit more water here. It's just getting kind of dry, so they're not coming together as well. So I'm just giving this a lot of dimension. I'm going to go ahead and dab on. So when it's really wet, like I think I want to pull my paint back some here. And I'm going to create some drips. See how that's dripping down? That's going to give it a nice aged look. But I want to pull back some of my paint, I think. So I actually just sprayed some water on here, made it nice and wet to keep my paint really active. And I'm just going to start dabbing to pull some of those undercolors through. So this gives it a nice layered aged look. And you want to make sure that if you're using a sponge that you keep your sponge wiped off. Because if you don't wipe the paint off your sponge, it's going to start, it'll really just be adding paint to your piece as opposed to pulling it off. So that that base coat shows. So I kind of like where this is at. I'm going to go ahead and leave that there. And I'm going to go ahead and work on these sides a little bit. You make sure you can see. Well, actually, let me go ahead and work on the legs. I don't think you're going to end up being able to see in there. So for the legs, I'm going to kind of line out that groove. And I'm going to go ahead and spray this down a bit. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and mist my brush. I started with a dry brush. Working with a wet brush, it's going to let my paint move into those lower areas more easily. It'll just go right in. And so for the legs, I want them to be a little bit smoother, a little bit more of a blendy look, I think. I want the bottoms to be pretty dark, so I think I'm going to go ahead and take some of this coffee bean, which is an extremely dark brown here, and I'm going to go ahead and come up from the bottom with that. And I'm just going to use one of my synthetic brushes. I just grabbed a round large. It really doesn't matter though. So I've got that kind of coming up, and I'm going to take some more of the pine cone. I'm using very little paint as I'm doing this, and I'm just going to go ahead and bring that up. So I actually think this might end up being my last layer, but a lot of times if you're going for a look like this, the more layers that you do, the more depth that you'll give it. So we're coming back in with some Rebel Yellow. I'm just going to go ahead and streak this up and down. It's pretty dried out, so I'm going to go ahead and just wet that down. You see how well those colors come together once I wet it? And this is, if you're new to blending, this is just a really easy way to blend. Let's go ahead and spin you a little bit more. And I'm going to add a little bit of texture. I'm not really going to add texture to this, but what I am going to do is dab it so that it'll appear like it's more textured. Because I've got this pretty wet so that I could get that blended undertone. We're going to come back in with a little bit of lemonade on the corner here. And I just want to get the lemonade on here because I'm going to kind of blend that in. Want it more highlighted, probably towards the top here. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and spray it down because I want to blend this leg. And we're going to take a round large here, and I'm going to just start pulling these colors together. So when you're blending and you want to pull together, you just go in various directions. So you can pull it all in. And then I'm wiping my brush off so that I get the excess paint off. And then I'm going to lightly feather over this so I can get a nice smooth blend. But I think that's actually a little bit too smooth. I'm going to go back and dry brush a little bit on the edge over here. This is a little bit too smooth for the rest of the piece. So let's go ahead and just dab it a little bit so I can pull some of this back. And so it'll kind of give it the effect to kind of pull it together with the rest of the piece. And again, I'm just painting. I really had no clear plan. I'm just looking at what looks good here. Just want to pull it around so I can see a little bit over here. Maybe come back in with some of the pine cone. And like I said, this is pretty much your final coat here. So let's do some more dabbing. So I think I've pulled everything I want back. I am going to go ahead. I think you guys can see at this angle, kind of this side section here. Let's go ahead and give it a little bit. So here, I'm going to actually mix together. Oh, that's a pretty color. I'm mixing together some of my Rebel Yellow and the pine cone to get that nice kind of taupe color that'll match the majority of what's on the front of this. And I'm lightly dry brushing it across so that you can kind of see that gravel road and that coffee bean poking out. And it kind of pulls together with what's over here on the side. I'm going to go back with a little pine cone just to kind of bring it together. Just here and there. Want to give it a little bit of shading. All right, so I kind of like how that's looking. And I feel like, so I'm going to stain the top, but like I said, I'm going to go on the top with the transfer. So let's kind of see how, I'm trying to see, because whenever I see something in person and how it looks on camera sometimes is a little bit different. So I kind of try to always look and see how it looks on camera. This right here on camera looks a little bit odd, but it is very layered. Just from that second coat, just from that technique with pulling it back, it's a very layered look. And what I like to do a lot of times as I'm working on something like this, I like to go back and do a little bit of dry brushing on it. So I'm actually just dipping my brush here, which they start to get mixed up with the colors, and some of the lemonade. And I'm actually going to do, I'm very, very lightly running my brush over this. So it's just catching that texture that I put on with those beginning colors, the Gravel Road and the Coffee Bean. It's just kind of catching the top of that. This is something that's usually very difficult to see on camera, but it adds a lot of dimension to your piece. Actually, I'm going to come in here. I want to put a little coffee bean on here, and I'm going to wipe the coffee bean off for the most part, right down here, so that it's a very, very dry brush. And I'm going to come in and I'm going to highlight some of these edges. And what I'll try to do, it's still a little bit wet. Yeah, I'm going to have to wait a second. It's still a little bit wet, but I'll bring you guys in for a close-up so you can really, really see that. It's a very subtle, very, very subtle look. So let's go ahead and work on this flat part here. And I probably want this to be a little bit more blendy like the legs, but I do want some of that texture and everything to show through. So let's go ahead and start with our pine cone. And you guys, I have a puppy, and she is, I don't know why she's so talkative right now. I'm not sure if somebody's at the door or what's going on. So we're just going to spray this down, and I'm only going to be working on this kind of this front section here. I'll have to kind of do that back in a little bit, but let's go ahead. My brush is a little contaminated too, so I'm actually, because I'm using the wrong one. That was my yellow one. So I'm going to come in with the pine cone. I've got the other brush here. And again, I'm going to dab it into like the areas that I'm looking for to be a little bit darker. And I've got this nice and wet so that my paint isn't drying very quickly. And let's go ahead and put a little bit over here on this side. I'm not worried about these side panels right now. I'll come back on those. But you know, a lot of times when you're using this technique, it's going to look really ugly before it looks better. It's just how it is. And when I first started painting, I used to think, oh my gosh, I've completely, oh, she's a Yorkie. And I was sick when she was supposed to get spayed, so I had to cancel it a few weeks ago. And, she's in heat now, so she's particularly crazy. She was laying here so calm just a little bit ago, and now she's pretty wild. So I'm going to go ahead and spray this down. It's getting a little bit dry. So let's come in here with some of this Rebel Yellow. And this I'm going to more streak across. I'm doing it pretty light. But I want those brush strokes in here. I want this to kind of, I want this to be textured. I want some of that, that initial color to show through. And then let's go ahead and highlight it with a little bit of lemonade. And I'm going to go ahead and dab in some. I'm going to come back with the pine cone brush and dab in some. Kind of spread it out a little bit. Taz. Her name is Taz for Tasmanian Devil. Oh, your dog's... You know what, Jennifer? She does the exact same thing whenever I'm watching anything and a dog barks or anything like that. It really gets her going. Hey, Little Bit. Her name's Taz, but I call her Little Bit. So again, I'm just dabbing, and this is so that I can create that texture, get it to pull back some, so I can get that undercoat to show through. This is also spreading it around a little bit. And instead of wiping off my sponge, if you're only using one sponge, you can wipe it off. I have actually just turned it around to use the side that I wasn't using before. Well, there she goes again. I don't know what she's after. So I'm going to spray this down because this side has gotten a little bit dry. I haven't done a lot of working with it. So I'm going to go ahead and bring this back over. Let's go ahead and dab it with the sponge. This is also how you would create kind of an old world effect, only you would apply your paint with the sponge. So I said I wanted this a little more blendy, but actually I think this is exactly what I want down here. I may add some of the transfer to this portion. So let's see. I'm going to go in and go back with a little bit of yellow over here. I'm going to spray it down some. And I think I'm going to kind of very lightly feather over because I want some of these other spots to kind of smooth out. There we go. So I've got some really nice speckles going on right here. I don't know if you guys can see those, but that's where this underside is coming up. This technique too, if I was using different colors, would be good if you're wanting like a stone look or something like that. You can get it with this method as well. So let's see if I can go back over now and do a little bit of dry brushing over here. See if this is kind of dry enough. So again, I'm just going to kind of come in with that coffee bean and very super little paint, and I'm going to wipe off what I have, and I'm just going to come in here. You can do some very light shading this way. A little bit more on there. Well, that was a little bit more than I wanted. That's okay. You can also just use your finger. Sorry, I'm trying to keep my head out of the way, but I can't see very well over here. Let me come back on this side. And what it's doing is it's really just catching the high points of that texture that I laid out. I think I'm going to go kind of in the center a little bit, kind of accentuate those lines some more. And you always want to do this part once it's dried a little bit. You'll end up with more like a blend if you do this prior to it drying. And actually, I'm going to go in and do some shading down here because you typically see it darker at the bottom. And I'm just dabbing it on. So I used to have a piece on my page. It was on, I don't know if you saw it. It was, it had some decoupage paper on it. It was a really large wardrobe. This is pretty much the method I used to create that. It's just layering and dabbing and coming back, seeing where you want to add some shading, all that good stuff. And actually, I'm going to dab some in here as well. I've got that recess there. And it's very little paint that's coming off my brush. Actually, I need to add a little bit more. So this is going to be a very, very rustic looking piece. Oh yeah. So what's happening right now, and hopefully you can see, is it's really picking up, all of those high points are picking up this, coffee bean. And that's what was created with the sea spray. Kind of going a little heavier on my brush right here. All right. I really thought I was going to paint this more yellow than I did, but it's actually coming out not so yellow. Let me see how this is going to look on here. Just kind of want to get an idea. So I'm going to cut one of these out so we can kind of see how it will. Obviously, I'm not going to put this on because a transfer does not like moisture, so your paint needs to be very dry before you would do something like this. But I just kind of want to see how the colors are going to look with that. Can you guys see that? So it's actually going to go really well with this rustic vintage transfer. I'm not obviously going to put it in that spot, but these kind of gray brownish tones are really going to come together well with that undercoat that I have. So we're just going to keep on painting, keep going around this. So let's go ahead and spray this down. Come here a little bit. And we're going to come back again with the chip brush and the pine cone. And we're going to go in these recesses. You know, I had my paint out as well. And I'm kind of, again, leaving some of that Gravel Road in here. Showing through in those recesses. And I'm just moving, as I'm dabbing, I'm moving my brush. You can see it's just kind of going all over. Just a lot of different directions so I don't end up with any, like, if I would only go in this direction, you can tell that vertical direction. So I'm going in a lot of different directions just to kind of really mix that in. Oh my goodness, she is really after something out there. We're going to come back with the Rebel Yellow. Got a lot of paint on my brush. I do a lot of finger painting too, honestly. Just want to smooth that out a little bit. Let's come down here where I can really bring it together. And I'm switching brushes to kind of really bring those colors in so they just create more than just that lemonade and pine, or not lemonade, but the Rebel Yellow and pine cone. It creates a blendy effect as well as that grunge. And all of these little peaks that I'm creating while I'm doing this, when I come back here at the ends with either wax or glaze and some, I'm almost positive I'm going to go with some dirt. If you're not familiar with Dixie dirt, it really gives you a unique, authentic, aged look. Let's come in. So I'm coming back in. I didn't apply any more paint to my brush, although I think I am now. A little bit of pine cone in here. And let's do a little highlight with the lemonade. Come here, Taz. And let's kind of Actually, let's kind of go ahead and smooth that out a little bit in that center section. So I'm going to come in with my synthetic brush to smooth it out. You know, and this is purely, whenever you're doing a style like this, it's purely about how you want it to look. It's just stepping back, looking at it, seeing if you like it. So see, now my paint has started to dry. Let me see if I can bring you guys in a little bit. My paint has started to dry a little bit, but it's still moist because of the water that I sprayed on it. So now when I dab, it's actually pulling back to reveal that initial coat of the Gravel Road. So that's what I've got going on over here. And we're going to go ahead and leave this for now. So as it dries, I'll come back and do some dry brushing on it in some spots. And like I said, that's what creates all of those layers. So this isn't actually turning out to look too yellow. It's actually coming out to look more like a neutral. Let's go ahead and we'll just move over to this side. I've got the inside of the legs and everything to do, but I feel like you guys don't have a good view of that. So we're just moving it around. And we don't have much longer here. And this is pretty much the same technique all over. So we've got the pine cone. You know what it is? I'm dabbing on this. I bet she thinks somebody is knocking at the door. The piece is only to put Dixie Belle on, right? Yeah, I think with me dabbing, she thinks somebody's at the door. Because that's where she's at, is the front door. Alright, so here we go. I know, I'm making this look so old. But cleaned it so well. Let's see. So this piece will end up looking very distressed, but it won't actually be any distressing to it. So let's go ahead and get a little bit of this in here. I'm going to streak that through some. Stop stealing my rad pad. And she's always coming in trying to steal something. Here we go. Let me move you back up. All right, we're gonna go in with a little bit of the lemonade too in here. Just dab that around. Come back with the little pine cone. It's just a lot of the same. And I want to pull some of this back. My paint got pretty thick on here. So, let's see. I'm pretty sure she might have stole the sponge I was using, but that's okay. I have another one here. Let's go ahead and just start pulling that back. Revealing some of those dark undercolors. There we go. And come in with a little more pine cone for some shading under here. And how is your piece going, Jennifer, with the stripes too? Let's see. Just kind of want it to be a little random. And then I'm keeping this nice and wet just so my paint stays really workable. My pine cone, I didn't add a lot of water to it whenever I kind of reactivated it. It's been a while since I've used it. And it's pretty thick, so it's drying out pretty quickly here. So, little bit, come here. Ooh, got a lot of paint there with the yellow. So I'm actually going to go back across so I can keep that. I've got a lot of paint on here, more than I intended. So what I'm doing is I don't want, when you get the paint so thick like that, it's automatically going to go into your grooves. Oh, perfect. It's ready for the stripes. It's automatically going to go into your groove. So I kind of started going in this cross motion. I'm going to go ahead and dab on here so I can pull back a little bit. And I'm pulling back because I got too much paint. So let's do a little highlight. Actually, I'm going to see if I can pull some of this now. I'm pulling some of the paint out here because I had too much on my brush. So I'm just running this down with kind of a dry brush. Oh, you have 4 dogs? Yeah. My kids were just visiting and they all have dogs too. So I actually had several here up until the other day. Thankfully, everybody but her is spayed and neutered. All right, so I'm actually going to come back and blend this a little bit more. That's just because I did too much paint there, more than I wanted. And then, once I do that, I can start dabbing again. Boy, that's really got a lot of paint on it still. I'm going to go ahead and wipe this off. I really kind of dunked it in the yellow there. And I'm going to go ahead and spray it again. And really, I'm just kind of redoing this coat here. But the more layers you have, the better, the better it looks, the more dimension you get. There we go. And probably at the point that I'm at right now with this, because I put so much of that paint on, I'd probably be better off to kind of let this section go for a little bit, let it kind of dry out, and then come back to it and do what I wanted. But I'm going to see if I can kind of bring it together. And every section of this piece doesn't need to look exactly the same. I'm actually going with a little lemonade, but I'm going to wipe it off some. Kind of go in, kind of streak in that particular highlight. What I'm doing is I'm just kind of offloading my brush, and then I'm kind of bringing it together. Add a little bit of lemon up here. I'm actually dabbing with the side of my brush right now. It's kind of helping me to control more the paint that's coming off of it. All right, and then even though this is still wet, I'm actually going to use a little bit more coffee bean. And actually, we're about up on time. And like I said, this live tonight, I really just kind of wanted to paint. There wasn't a specific, I'm going to come in and highlight this side. And what I'm doing is I'm shading. This is slightly rounded. I'm just kind of shading that so that dimension is more evident. And I mean, this will be a pretty quick finish. Let's see, I'm going to come up here a little bit, come down some from the top. This will be a pretty quick finish, so I will actually post final pictures of this, and probably this week. And I'm going to bring you guys back around because now I'm going to go back and really do some dry brushing on here, which I normally always do. I come back with my brushes that I've been using. Hey, Jerry. And when I'm going for a finish like this, I'm just wiping my brush off. And I usually go back for some details. And once I do this, I'll bring you in so you can see how that texture is picking up. Let's come up here. And once your brush gets really dry, that's when you can really start shading with it. So I'll bring you in here shortly. I'm using the side of my brush because I don't want everything, dry brushed in one direction. When you use the side of your brush like this, it helps you outline a little bit. And actually I'm going to rub this very lightly over. This technique right here too is excellent if you're doing a fake wood grain, like a driftwoody look or something like that. The dry brush light, oh, I didn't paint that part. Let's go ahead and outline this section a little bit with some dry brushing. I'm gonna bring it over. Let all of that texture really pick this up. And I'm gonna give you a close-up, like I said, of this section. So you can really see the effect that this dry brushing and this layering has. Boy, the thing doesn't look yellow at all, but I'm not surprised by that. So let me bring you guys in because I'm going to go ahead and pop off and I'll finish this up. But let me move. I had some stains up too in case we switch to staining the top. But let me bring you guys in. Hopefully, can you guys see this? So see, this is where I did that dry brush highlight where it's really picking up those edges. It's giving it a lot of detail. It looks really kind of blotchy on the camera, but it's not in real life. You can see like right here how all of that texture picked up that coffee bean color, and it just looks like it's just kind of old and aged. This tabletop, by the way, it's going to be a much darker color up here. But just all that layering and all that dabbing kind of gives you that old world grungy look. And then I'll come back and grunge it up, like I said, with some glaze and probably some dirt or some wax and dirt, one of those. But see, actually, one more thing. See, it's hard for me to tell whether you can see this on camera, but all of these little specks are where that coffee bean was picked up from that sea spray. So when you see something in real life, that's how they achieve that look. But thank you guys so much for hanging out tonight. I know it wasn't my usual. This is definitely not my usual piece. I love blending, love my transfers and all that good stuff. But thank you guys so much for hanging out, and you guys take care. Have a great night. Thanks.